Analytics podcast. It is June 23rd. I'm here with Stuart Gibson. We're going to go over PGA today. SuperDraft was kind enough to give us some tickets to give out. So the deal is anyone who subscribes to the ASA channel and then comments with their SuperDraft name will be entered into a lottery where they're giving out tickets. Stuart, how many tickets are given out?
I think we've just set up one, but we can talk to the SuperDraft guys and see if there are more available. But yeah, really excited for that promo. I know the U.S. Open I think went well on SuperDraft last week. I think our optimals were quite strong. Our optimal lineup, cash game lineup, missed on Zalatoris getting through, but Vegas at a super high multiplier got through to the weekend, kind of fizzled. Had Rahm, had Rory was really strong. Harris English was a part of our optimal mix. He had a really great showing at, I believe, 1.25x. So yeah, hoping to run it back this weekend at the Travelers in Connecticut on the East Coast this week for the first time in a while. Yeah, it should be a fun tournament. Travelers, I think, is always one of the more popular non-major tournaments. Looks like a pretty solid field with Bryson, Koepka, and DJ all showing up. Yeah, it should be a fun tournament. So encourage you guys to subscribe to our channel, or you can retweet and comment your SuperDraft name on Twitter, or like Brandon said, a ASA channel sub plus a comment of your SuperDraft username, and we will do a random draw this afternoon to get one of those tickets, or maybe even more tickets sent out.
So how did U.S. Open treat you? For me, it was not great. You kind of needed to hit it pretty hard with Rahm winning, and I really didn't.
Yeah, so I did well in cash. I usually, like, when you have a good cash game shell, that tends to generate positive tournament outcomes as well, but I ended up losing in tournaments, but had a good cash showing, which is nice. I forget my exact lineup, but yeah, focused on Rahm, Vegas, and yeah, like I said, the ASA optimal did quite well. So yeah, pretty good showing, and I kind of needed that after a couple down weekends. So yeah, hoping to run it back this weekend at the Travelers.
So what we like to do on these shows is sort of start with the lead, like start with our current optimal, which frankly is a strange one this week. We have some high multiplier guys that I have very little familiarity with, guys like Hank Lebioda, Austin Eckroat. I have to say that I don't know who these guys are, and I know almost everyone by face and name on the PGA Tour. Why do we have them? Because, as we pointed out with SuperDraft scoring, it is very par friendly if you just sort of perform with a fairly low volatility, decent score. You do well in terms of the scoring. It's a scoring system that's very friendly to high multiplier guys. And so we get guys like Eckroat and Lebioda at these high multipliers, 1.6, 1.65. So like running through our top 7 guys, it's Lebioda, Tringale, Grillo, Eckroat, Kyle Stanley, Werenski, and Stallings. All of those guys are above 1.35 multipliers. And then, as we mentioned, Eckroat and Lebioda are 1.6, 1.65. We rarely see multipliers that high in our optimizers. So how far down do we have to scroll to get the stars? Well, this week we have to scroll pretty far down. We're talking like 40, 50 golfers down before we get to the Cantlays and DJs, Brysons of the world. So it's an odd It's an odd week. Do you have an intuition for why we're spitting out so many high multiplier guys for this
Yeah,
course, this setup? Obviously, at the U.S. Open, we were on some big names like Rahm. So what's going on here?
yeah. So I think I'm looking at this course info tab in our PGA projection optimization tool, which can be accessed for free for SuperDraft projections through the PGA dropdown. And there's a couple things that jump out. I always like starting and looking at this like course kind of fit table, which we have the coefficients of strokes gained putting around the green approach and off the tee play, as well as like the baseline scoring baseline. And these are Z scores, so any value is kind of plus or minus one standard deviation off the tour a tour course average. And one thing that jumps out to me is just a lot of really pretty strong negative coefficients in putting around the green and off the tee play, meaning that the relative importance or kind of impact or weight, whatever you want to call it, for these three strokes gain categories in particular are down weighted in terms of their relative importance for fantasy projectability. And when you see a bunch of these negative coefficients, to me that suggests that there's just high volatility with this course. Like if 3 out of the 4 strokes gained categories, players' prior strokes gained metrics have down weighted or kind of reduced importance in terms of projecting player outcome, you're talking about a highly volatile course where, I think volatility lends itself towards these, high multiplier guys who have kind of increased probability in making it through to the weekend. And then also on top of that, scoring has been, very negative at TPC River Highlands. There's been, I think the winner has had anywhere from like negative 12 to negative 12 under to 19 under over the last 5 tournaments that they've had there. So when you kind of combine high volatility where, the best golfers aren't necessarily as likely to kind of finish near the top. Like I think US Open and these majors, I think tend to have lower volatility in that the leaderboard is going to have high correlation with just the, PGA Tour rankings, latent skill of these players, what have you. In a course that is high volatility, I think there's likely to be kind of lower correlation between player latent skill, PGA Tour rank, overall strokes gained, what have you, and the leaderboard. So when that's the case, I think there's just elevated opportunity for some of these high multiplier guys to make it through to the weekend. On top of that, like it's a strong field in terms of the names at the top. I mean, if we look at the high multiplier guys, we got DJ, we got DeChambeau, we got Brooks, but we got Cantlay. But after that, like it does drop off pretty quickly. Like Finau, Reed, Scheffler, are strong golfers. But there's kind of where the U.S. Open, I think, had really strong golfers in kind of the middle of the field. There is a bit of a drop off in terms of the overall depth of the field. And when you sort on win odds, I mean, we're seeing guys like Scheffler, 23 to 1 as we're at the U.S. Open. There's just no way he was getting 23 to 1. Brian Harmon, Streelman 31 to 1, English 36 to 1. I mean, we have a number of kind of Charlie Hoffman, 41 to 1. We have a number of guys in kind of the 50 or better odds range who in a deeper field probably are, looking at 70 plus in terms of win odds. So that's my intuition. And then another thing, just going back to the course info, the one strokes gain trait that really jumps out is in terms of having a increased weight of importance in terms of projecting player outcome is strokes gained approach. And when we search on value, which is post multiplier projection, we're seeing some of the guys at the top. I mean, look at the strokes gained approach on these guys. Like Lebioda, I'm reasonably familiar with. I think he's kind of a young golfer, but kind of outside of the tier of young guys like Morikawa and Hovland, obviously, or we would know a bunch about this guy, but he's a young golfer. And like, if you look at his strokes gained over the past 6 months, he's been losing strokes kind of at aggregate, hasn't been the strongest putter, but has been really strong with his approach play. You look at Cameron Tringali at 1.45, who's at 67 to 1 to win, which I think is really great. Vegas odds for a guy at his SuperDraft price. He's been gaining strokes just about everywhere except off the tee, but strong approach play over the past 6 months, 0.4 strokes gained per round approach. Griot, struggles around the green, kind of tour average or tournament average putting over the last 6 months, but has been super strong approach. Eckroat, I'm with you. I know nothing about, but he's at the multiplier max of 1.65, 251 to 1 to win. So, a dark horse, but definitely not like totally out of the realm of kind of making it through to the weekend. And, he struggles putting, struggles around the green, but has been plus in terms of strokes gained approach. Kyle Stanley struggled with putting, but has been gaining 0.37 strokes per round on approach shots. So, I think that's some of Stallings has great strokes gained approach. So I think maybe those are some of the reasons why we're seeing in general, like some of these high multiplier guys bubble to the top, and also with some of these specific guys that we're highlighting, I think they all just have really strong course fit for the tournament, specifically like Griot and Lebiota. So I hope that sheds some light on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of what we know about the course, comparables are somewhat tough to find, but some people say Riviera is a close comparable. The greens are relatively small, but guys hit a lot of the greens, so they're small but kind of easy to hit based on the overall characteristics of the course. So approach is very important. Scrambling and short game play is de-emphasized just because guys are hitting a lot of greens in regulation. And it's the type of course where if your guys are doing a lot of bunker play or chip shots, they're not at the top of the leaderboard anyway. So those categories, it makes sense that those are relatively de-emphasized, and it absolutely makes sense that the approach game is emphasized. In particular, the short iron play is supposed to be very important, especially wedges. And we can expect that a lot of the guys will be hitting wedges into this green. If you look at who has done well here in the past, some guys with very strong history, Bubba, I think, has won 3 times. Obviously, a bomber, Bryson, has great course history. King Bomber, Cantlay has great course history, although he's never won. And DJ has great course history and is, I believe, the defending champion. So, and DJ in particular is a guy that seems to be a great fit because he's known as being very dialed in on wedges in particular. So it would be, and then putting, as you say, it's a mix of bent grass and one other type of grass. I don't recall, but it's thought that bent grass is a reasonable way to model it. And then our putting coefficient is very negative, as you mentioned. And when that happens, it has the bizarre sort of quantitative feature that you actually can almost think of it as you want the bad putters. And the reason that's true is because all these guys are on tour because they score really low. And if they're on the tour and they stay on the tour and have low average scores in general, and they do that despite putting poorly, it's because they do everything else really, really well. And this is the type of course that you want them on. Anyway, I think that's a solid sort of intro. If we look at it in terms of Vegas odds, it's a stronger field than normal for this tournament based on the unusual 2021 calendar, and it has great characteristics for DFS and for a betting event because all of the people at the top of the field, this is going to be their last. A lot of them, this is going to be their last tournament before the British Open. And so this is not just like a stop that they're sort of fitting in as part of a long Florida trip or a long California trip or something. Like this is the last stop. They're going because they want to try to win the tournament, and then they're going to go home for a bit and start their British Open prep. So I don't think there's any need to question motivation of any of these players, and we have a very strong field this year. What do you think about playing some of these top plays despite the lower projection, or are you just going to skip over them entirely? Guys like Bryson, DJ, Cantlay, Koepka,
So I think I would want to be underweight on the 1X guys. And that's simply coming from just how they project. It feels like there are guys that project more favorably. But I mean, I think you do raise a good point. If you're going just by projections, you're going to get a lot of exposure to these high multiplier lineups. And, golf outcomes, the distributions of golf outcomes tend to be bimodal, right? Like guys either make the cut and they are in kind of the high end bucket of scores, or they miss the cut and are going to be in the lower end of bucket scores. And I think on a scorer's course like this, the split, making it through to the weekend will guarantee just exceptionally high scores. And we want to avoid setting ourselves up for too much risk of having a miscut guy for tournament purposes. You're going to need 6 of 6 to make it through to the weekend, as where on a course where making it through to the weekend has relatively less scoring value, which, was the case last weekend at the US Open. Sometimes there can be exceptional value, even if you get 5 of 6 guys through, if your 5 guys are all kind of top 5 to 7 or so. There are routes, I think, to putting up good tournament scores, but I think this weekend you're going to need to get 6 of 6 through to have, a top 1% type tournament score. And, all these guys that are projecting high from kind of a mean projection standpoint, all of them have anywhere from like 40 to 60% chance of, not all of them, but like, I would say Tringale's pretty good odds to make it through to the weekend, Griot, what have you. But, they're anywhere from like a 30 to, we'll say, 70% chance of making it through to the weekend. And, you keep, if you put too many chips on 50% to make it through to the weekend, guys, like it's just really unlikely that you get 6 of 6 through. I mean, that would just be, 50% to the power of 6, which is going to be pretty low. Less than 2% chance of kind of getting 6 of 6 through. So, I do think you need to kind of layer. I mean, we talk about this every weekend, like layering in your build so that you're not overexposed to high multiplier guys, and you just need kind of to catch lightning in a bottle to get Lebioda through, say Werenski through, but also not being too overexposed to the guys that are locks to make it through to the weekend, because with the high volatility, with the kind of thin field from a 30th percentile down, inevitably there are going to be high multiplier guys that make it through to the weekend, and on a scorer's course, can put up scores of 12 under or 15 under or something like that. So finding a balanced mix, I think, is valuable. I think with just the weekend, there are, or with the field rather, and kind of the super draft pricing, like there are a number of guys that I feel pretty good about at the, you know, with multipliers greater than 1x. So like Casey is one of those guys. He has not won in his last 5 appearances here, but he's been really strong. 3 top 5 finishes since 2016, gaining over 2 strokes per round over in his last 5 appearances at the Travelers. So like, I feel really good about Casey. I mean, he's got the same win odds as 1x Koepka, similar win odds to, you know, DeChambeau, Johnson, who are at 1x. Like, I think I'm more inclined to kind of take my shots on guys like Casey. Scheffler's got strong win odds for 1.15. Reed, you know, Finau, Answer has really strong course history, has great win odds, has played well at the Travelers and is at 1.25x. Like, in my mind, I would rather go with, I mean, you even mentioned Cantlay as having really strong course history here. I think a really good fit with great approach play. I don't know. I think I would prefer to be underexposed to, you know, these 3 guys at the top who obviously have great win equity, but at 1x, like, you know, if these guys don't finish within the top 2, I don't really see how they're a part of tournament winning lineups. And I mean, sure, cumulatively, I think they have pretty good odds at finishing inside the top 2. But, you know, even if DJ, you know, if pretty much like if any one of these guys finishes second, I don't know that you have to have them in your lineup to win the tournament, to win the super draft tournament. So I think I would be more partial to taking shots on some of these guys down here. Like Casey really stands out. Reed, Finau, Answer really stands out. Streelman at 31 to 1 win odds at 1.35x. Like, I think I'm going to be more inclined to take shots on some of these guys.
Yeah, we think about it the same way. I'm completely with you on this, that the core of your lineup should be these mid multiplier players that have a high probability of making the cut. My list, absolutely with you on Casey, and he's probably the play that has like the most quantitative support in terms of like strokes gained the past 10 tournaments and stuff like this. And it's pretty insane where he is. So I think he's probably the guy that you can feel most comfortable with. And then Answer, just a pure ball striker, like amazing stats on approach, which we already said is the most important stat this week. So I think he's like extremely likely to make the cut. Extremely good play. Grillo, I also think is an amazing play. Historically, he's been a little bit higher volatility than some of these guys we're mentioning, but I think he's a good play. And then also on my list in this range, English, Steele, although he's on a he's been doing very well in terms of consistency, although historically he hasn't been super consistent, but I like him at 1.35. Finau at 1.15. Harman, I think, is a great play. Chris Kirk and Streelman. So those are sort of my guys around the middle.
Yeah. And one final note, actually, on kind of as we just wrap up the notion of understanding multipliers and how they play out, like this, and we talk about it pretty regularly. The SuperDraft scoring system is quite different from some of the other DFS sites in that the delta in fantasy points between first place and second place is quite low. I think in DraftKings it's like a 10-point delta. On SuperDraft, 2 points. Whether you finish in first versus fourth place, only a 5-point delta. So like on a course where there's going to be a ton of scoring and under a scoring system that is probably is more skewed towards hole scoring than finish position. I mean, definitely, I think like being underweight on some of these guys that have super high win equity, but like are unlikely to it's just unlikely, right, that DJ outshoots the field by 5 strokes. I think he has really great chance of winning, but these top three guys, like for them to pay off, they would have to win and outshoot the field by, 4 or 5 strokes. So that is one kind of nuance to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And I think when you're looking at our optimals, the top 100 optimals, our top 100 optimals are pretty close together in terms of projected score. So I think based on our conversation and based on eyeballing these lineups, I think basically the cumulative multipliers are ranging between 8 and 9.25 or so. And we kind of like the ones that have a multiplier around 8. And I think there's a good case for going for like 7.5 and slightly lower projected points. But a reasonable thing to do would be to play around with our optimizer and sort of run 200 optimals or so and just scroll through and see which lineups you're most comfortable with and check those off. Or if you want to take some strong stances on certain players, lock them in and then roll your optimizer after that. There are some guys that are in almost all of our optimal lineups that I wouldn't mind just to fade on. Like if Grillo is super popular, like I certainly don't mind fading him. Tringali, I wouldn't mind fading if he were going to be super popular. He has had some concerning data like the past 4 tournaments. Yeah, I would recommend people mess around with our optimizer a little bit. With that, good luck this weekend, Stuart. It's a fun tournament. It's a packed schedule.
Yeah, definitely. And for those, we see some comments with SuperDraft names. Again, if you want to be entered for a free ticket giveaway, subscribe, comment your SuperDraft name, and we will get those handed out this afternoon.
All right. Thanks, guys.